13. Auxiliary, composite, and native troops. Auxiliaries, the other useless kind of troops, are involved when you call upon a powerful state to come to your defense and assistance. Pope Julius did this in the recent past when, having seen the sad account given of themselves by his mercenaries in the Ferrara campaign, he turned to auxiliaries and arranged for Ferdinand of Spain to assist him with his men and troops. In themselves, auxiliary forces can prove useful and reliable, but for the one who calls them in, they are almost always a disaster. You are left in the lurch if they are defeated, and in their power if they are victorious. Although ancient history is full of examples, nonetheless, I will be content with the fresh example provided by Pope Julius II. His course of action could not have been more ill-considered. When wanting to take Ferrara, he threw himself into the hands of a foreigner. But such was his good fortune that something else happened which prevented his reaping what he had sown. After his auxiliaries were routed at Ravenna, the Swiss arrived on the scene and drove the victors off, so that to everyone's surprise, including his own, Julius escaped being at the mercy of the enemy, as they had fled, or being in the power of his own auxiliaries, as he had not conquered with their arms. The Florentines, being completely without forces, hired 10,000 Frenchmen to reduce Pisa, because of which decision they incurred more dangers than at any time during their troubles. The Emperor of Constantinople, to withstand his neighbors, sent into Greece 10,000 Turks who, when the war was over, refused to leave, and this was how the infidels started to enslave Greece. So anyone who does not want military success should have recourse to this kind of force, because it is far more dangerous than a mercenary army. Auxiliaries are fatal. They constitute a united army, wholly obedient to the orders of someone else. But mercenaries, having conquered, need more time and opportunity to harm you, for they are not a compact force, and you have raised and paid them yourself. Mercenaries also are led by someone you appoint, and he cannot immediately assume sufficient authority to be able to do you harm. To sum up, cowardice is the danger with mercenaries, and valor with auxiliaries. Wise princes, therefore, have always shunned auxiliaries and made use of their own forces. They have preferred to lose battles with their own forces than win them with others, in the belief that no true victory is possible with alien arms. Now, I shall never hesitate to cite Cesare Borgia and his conduct as an example. The Duke used auxiliaries in his invasion of the Romagna, going there at the head of the French troops. With those he took Imola and Forli, but then he decided that they were unsafe, and he turned to mercenaries, in the belief that less risk was involved, hiring the Orsini and the Vitelli. In making use of these, he found them to be suspect, disloyal, and dangerous, so he got rid of them and raised his own forces. One can easily see the difference between these forces by considering the difference between the standing of the Duke when he had only the French, when he had the Orsini and the Vitelli, and when he relied only on his own forces and himself. He grew in stature at each stage, and he was held in real respect only when everyone saw that he was absolute master of his armies. I did not want to depart from recent Italian examples, yet I do not want to ignore Hiero of Syracuse, one of those I mentioned before. As I said then, when the Syracusans had given him command of their armies, he immediately realized that the mercenaries were useless. They were hired troops, organized like our Italian mercenaries. It seemed to him impossible either to keep them or to disband them, so he had them all cut to pieces, and then he made war with his own, not alien, soldiers. I would also like to recall to mind an allegory from the Old Testament, which is relevant to my argument. David offered Saul to go and fight Goliath, the Philistine champion, and Saul, to inspire him with courage, gave him his own weapons and armor. Having tried these on, David rejected them, saying that he would be unable to fight well with them, and therefore he wanted to face the enemy with his sling and his knife. In short, armor belonging to someone else either drops off you, or weighs you down, or is too tight. When Charles VII, the father of King Louis XI, had by good fortune and prowess liberated France from the English, he realized the need to have his own armed forces and set up the militia composed of mounted troops and infantry. Subsequently, his son King Louis abolished the ordinance governing the infantry and started to hire Swiss soldiers, and this mistake, followed by others, has, as we can now see, been the cause of the dangers threatening that kingdom. The increased standing allowed the Swiss has demoralized the rest of the army. The infantry have been abolished altogether, and the mounted troops have been made dependent on foreign troops, because being accustomed to take the field along with the Swiss, they have come to believe that without them, they cannot win a battle. Because of this, the French are no match for the Swiss, and without Swiss help, feel no match for anyone else. So France has made use of a mixed force, partly mercenary and partly citizen. This combination is far better than a purely auxiliary or purely mercenary force, and far inferior to a citizen army. The example of France should be enough, because that kingdom would be unbeatable if what Charles had instituted had been developed or maintained. But men are so imprudent that they take up a diet which, as it tastes good to start with, they do not realize is poisonous, a point I made before when talking about wasting fevers. The prince who does not detect evils the moment they appear is lacking in true wisdom, but few rulers have the ability to do so. If we consider what was the start of the downfall of the Roman Empire, it will be found that it was simply when the Goths started to be hired as mercenaries. To that small beginning can be traced the inebriation of the forces of the Roman Empire, and the Goths inherited the prowess which the Romans lost. I conclude, therefore, that unless it commands its own arms, no principality is secure. Rather, it is dependent on fortune, since there is no valor and no loyalty to defend it when adversity comes. Wise men have always held and believed that nothing is so weak or unstable as a reputation for power which is not based on one's own forces. One's own forces are composed of an army of one's subjects, or an army of citizens or dependents. All other forces are either mercenaries or auxiliaries. It is easy to discover how to organize one's own forces if one studies the precedents set by the four rulers I named above, and if one understands how Philip, the father of Alexander the Great, and many other republics and princes have armed and organized themselves. I willingly defer to the wisdom of what they instituted.